We're going live now. So good morning and welcome to you all from a absolutely white, beautiful and freezing Greenwich. I have with me this morning two stalwarts of the industry, Grahaeme Henderson from Shell. Many of course also know him from the UK Chamber, where he's been an incredibly good supporter and servant of the industry. And Tskakos, who of course comes from one of the great Greek ship-owning families, and not only that, but of course served fantastically as chair of Tskakos for a number of years. So two people well known to all of you and very well embedded in the industry. Now, a few points. Of course, we're kicking off this morning and trying to stimulate discussion. So the real star of the show is you and the questions that you want to ask. So start thinking about them for your breakout sessions. And if you have any ideas or thoughts that you want to add, there's a chat bar where you can add them. And if I don't get round to them this morning, we'll be able to feed them in later on in the conference. Now, this has been an extraordinary year, and many of you will be wondering, what in the world, in the Lord's name, I've got around my neck? Well, actually, it's a tie. They were quite popular in the last century. And this morning, myself and Grahaeme and Nick thought we would fashion them just to remind people of how things might have been just a year ago. Of course, a year ago, our focus was entirely on the main cause of our conversation this morning, which is creating pathways to 2030 and decarbonising shipping. In the meantime, of course, we've had a global pandemic and our lives have been changed in ways that we could never really have imagined. But there are some very important points on that, and I hope that we'll talk this morning a little bit about the Neptune Declaration and about our relationship with the public and with the way they think about seafaring. But also at the core and the heart of everything that we do in shipping, we have to think about safety. And our response to the pandemic has made the public think more strongly about the duties we owe one another to stay safe and sure. And so that's something that I hope that we'll touch on as well in our conversations. It's said of the pandemic that it may not change things as much as act as an accelerator and bring on things that were ready to change anyway. So I hope that we'll be able to provoke our panelists this morning with talking about what it is that they can see that might be brought on more quickly, because the impacts of this are going to be quite long. They won't just be the pandemic, which now looks like it's under control, but possibly a decade of repercussions. So on that basis, I'd like to hand you over for some introductory words to Tskakos. And Nick, I'm going to pass over the word to you now, so maybe you could give us a short introduction.
Paddy, thank you very much, and good morning to all. It's really a missed pleasure to be back seeing people like Grahaeme and yourselves. It's like an old rock band getting back together again. I think we have gotten very, very rusty in the last year. And it's been an extraordinary year for, I would say, for everybody's life, regardless of the industry. But for us also, all of us employ and we have to care for the well-being of thousands in our case, and tens of thousands in Grahame's case of employees around the world. So I think our obligation was more focused on the well-being of the human factor rather than anything else. At the same time, we try to run our business, try to keep a steady course, just to use the expression, at times of unprecedented turbulence. And we are a year later. Actually, today, perhaps I was listening on the radio on my way down here. It's the actual day of the first Corona case and the acceptance. It's Corona Day. I hope it's going to be a day that we'll forget very soon, but it's actually the first official case a year ago on February 11th, 2020. So I'm sure we did not plan our meeting for that, but this is the case, and it's been a very long 365 days. Many of us had to feel the virus in our families. I know many of us, and hopefully the majority have gone out in a much better way. But as I said, we are glad that we have kept the majority of our seafarers and onshore employees safe, and this continues to be our main obligation. And at the meantime, we try to run a business, and I think, Paddy, you still remember how that used to be.
Indeed, mate. And Graeme, have you found similar things? What are your images and impressions of this first year of a year since Corona Day?
Okay, well, certainly 2020 has been a tumultuous year. We each had our own personal challenges to manage, as well as professional ones too, worrying about colleagues, business continuity and customers. But alongside all of this, two big themes kept returning into my email box, my conversations and the media. The first one was the safety of workforces around the world, often working, as we've said, in very difficult conditions, and the urgent need around climate change as well. And none of these have disappeared as we head into 2021. In fact, they've become even more focused. And almost every day, I read about accidents on ships with people being seriously and fatally injured. They've got tragic impacts on families and children. And that terrible day is never forgotten, Paddy, and time never heals. I also read about the devastating repercussions that result from climate change on people and people's lives. And these things worry me. And I'm sure they worry you and worry everybody who's listening in.
Now, I think,
but at the same time, Paddy, I've also got optimism. And if there's one thing that 2020 taught us, it's the power of collective and focused problem solving and the need for care for our people and for our planet.
Now that, Graeme, I think you've hit something that we've all been, I suppose, remarkably positively shocked about, the ability of collective action, which so many of us have said, no, the world's not organized in a way where it can act collectively. And maybe we can just reflect for a moment on how that collective action has looked, and maybe on the Neptune Declaration, and whether or not we've been able to take an opportunity here to get shipping and seafarers into the public spotlight. It's something that my museum would like to help with, actually, and be a sort of a good broadcasting medium for some of the issues. But Neptune Declaration, image of seafarers, have we been able to get that right in the public eyes?
Well, maybe I can start on that then, Paddy. So I think it's raised the profile most definitely. It's been covered in mainstream media. I don't think ever before seafarers have been highlighted, and the logistics of shipping, and Princess Anne was referring to that earlier in her speech. And I think the vital role of seafarers has brought the issue of safety to a wider audience. In Shell, we've been working this hard. We have now, literally in the last few weeks, been able to get all of our seafarers off of our ships. So we've relieved everybody who was on the ships at the beginning of the coronavirus. And they've all had home leave. And in fact, some are back on ships again. So we're pleased with that. It's taken quite some effort, though, and we're sharing that with the Neptune Declaration. And I do hope that the number of signatories on that Neptune Declaration that we'll see some positive movement forward.
And Nikolas, have you been able to manage the turnover of staff because it's been a major challenge for the industry?
Yes, I mean, I think that really helped to put the human factor back into shipping for the public eye. I think people are not very familiar with our industry. They look at those big objects, floating objects, without knowing if those are remote controlled, operated, or there are actually, as Graeme very correctly said, humans running them, which is the case, hopefully for some time to come. And having all these issues, we ended up, and I think most of us, taking big risks and big expenses, huge expenses, having to ballast vessels all the way to locations like the Philippines, which is a big center of seafarers, as we all know, and it's a friendly it's a friendly country and a friendly port to be able to embark and disembark our crew. So we had to actually spend tens of millions of dollars to make sure that the mental state of our seafarers, let alone their health, continues. And I think all of us did it as all the shipping organizations took those actions. And I am very glad that we have all worked in sync, as you said, in very difficult circumstances.
Well, at the museum, we hope that we'll be able to memorialize this great effort, because we're collecting oral histories from seafarers about the COVID period. And I hope at some stage we'll be able to put on an exhibition of the COVID relief story. We are running Exposure Lives at Sea, a photographic exhibition to show images of real working people at sea, but beautifully shot. So it is really important that the public become aware of shipping other than as some othering, distant and polluting body, because that seems to be very much the way we're seen. We're either in the news for pollution or we're in the news for not being safe. And maybe we could talk a little bit then about the pathways. How are we going to get towards creating pathways for 2030? How are we going to start making those decisions? I know that, Grahaeme, you've done a fantastic amount of work on the engineering and science behind how we might move towards different fuels. And I know, Nikolas, you must be in the agony of trying to make investment decisions about it. So perhaps we could just run through some of those steps, and maybe we could start with you, Grahaeme.
Yeah, okay. Well, looking at the fuel side of it first. So as we know, there are tremendous challenges in the different fuels. We can do a lot already, and if you look back over the last 10 years, a lot has been done. It's not really well known, but the carbon intensity of the global fleet has actually reduced by between about 20 and 40%, and that's been through things like larger ships, new hull designs, digital technologies, speed management, efficiency through port, etc. So actually the industry has done quite well without realizing it. But of course, we need to do more and do much more quickly as well. I think there are a few things. Firstly, we should try and apply energy efficient technologies as much as we possibly can. And they are available now. So for example, things like trim and draft optimization. There's commercialized piece of software which Shell has been involved in called JAWS, and you can reduce emissions by 7%. Things like air lubrication to reduce surface friction, again, another 8%. Wind technology we've been trialing, another 8%. And so you start to add these up, and the good thing here is, of course, they've got a good business case because they reduce costs too, because they reduce the fuel usage. So that's something we all can do now. The other thing that we can do now is use LNG as a fuel. It's the lowest carbon fuel that is available at the moment. And if you combine those energy efficient technologies with LNG, it is possible to reduce by some 40%, maybe even more in terms of emissions. And certainly we've got ships on the water and coming onto the water which have got those sort of emissions. Of course, that then leads us into the new fuels. Certainly in Shell, we see hydrogen as the fuel of the future. And the simple reason for that, Paddy, is that most of the other industrial sectors are using hydrogen. If you look at aircraft, if you look at rail, look at road, even heavy industry, they're moving to hydrogen. So what that means is that it will be an available fuel, and it will be available around the world. So therefore, shipping does not have to pay all those infrastructure costs. And I know there's been some studies done, and it is trillions and trillions of dollars to provide this fuel, or whatever it is, whether it's hydrogen or another fuel, in ports and terminals around the world. So that's why we see hydrogen. We're trialing a lot around hydrogen. So we have a consortium partnership in a project called Hystra, which is to take CO2-free hydrogen from Australia to Japan. Shell will be managing the ships carrying hydrogen, so we will get first-hand experience of being able to distribute hydrogen. And also we're involved in a whole range of projects around the world, such as in Rotterdam, where Shell's working on a large-scale electrolysis of hydrogen. So what I think is important, though, Paddy, is regardless of whatever fuel is chosen, and it's not a competition between the fuels. It's not one fuel versus another. It really is the one which will work best for shipping.
And so
what is important is that we work together, both in shipping and also across in those other sectors that I've talked about.
Is it realistic then, Graeme, to sort of pick horses for courses in the sense of different ship types having fuels that might work better for them?
I think it could be, yes, absolutely. And certainly a ferry which is going from sort of one point to another and maybe shorter journeys is very different from the kind of ships that Nikolas's group and my group run, which are traveling halfway around the world or more. So certainly, very, very different, and it could well be that plays out, yeah. And
Nikolas, do you think that there's a big difference because in the different ship types there are different customers, and the customers put different pressures on the businesses that supply them. Do we imagine that the cruise sector will have different pressures from the people that go on cruises for decarbonising earlier? Or do we imagine that ferries, because they compete with cars, or lorries, will have to decarbonise earlier? And what do you think it means for investment decisions for your group?
Yes, well, I think right now it's true that amongst all the uncertainties that we are facing because of the unprecedented epidemic, we are also facing huge uncertainties on the future, on the longer-term future of the combustion of our vessels. And I think if the industry, as Grahaeme said, is there, it has proven it moves very quickly when actually it has a proven technology. I think that happened in the double-double. I think the people around this seminar remember the double-double event, which has been a huge success. There was a lot of talk about it, but when the technology was implemented and proven, the industry just moved very quickly. And right now, in a matter of 10 or 15 years, the double-double ships are the only ships around, which has saved huge environmental disasters. I mean, every single day we know that things have been saved by that technology. So when we know of a technology, we are there to invest in it and to follow. Right now, we are confused. Grahaeme mentioned LNG. I mean, we like LNG. If LNG was something that long-term, we would all be out there retrofitting or making new orders on ships with LNG or dual LNG capacity. But again, there is a question mark if LNG is something that will carry us all the way, or we will have a ship has a life of 20 to 25 years. So we are not, it's very hard to make a plan, make an investment of something that might change by 2030. So right now we are taking the steps, as Grahaeme said, of making efficiencies work on existing vessels, and we're waiting for the people who should know better and have the technology, like the major oil companies, to guide us. I believe that when the technology is proven, the industry will follow very fast.
And the crisis that we've been through now in the pandemic has seen something which would have been unpredictable in even a year ago, which was the pharmaceutical industry, which was well known for secrecy and for restrictive behavior, just because people had to earn back their investment. In fact, has worked in a completely different way in the last 12 months to accelerate the delivery of vaccines. So there's some sort of lesson to be learned there about how we cooperate and how we share information. Do you feel that the shipping industry is in a good place for that kind of cooperation? Because if I understand Nikolas correctly, and Grahaeme, maybe I can ask you first, because do you agree with Nikolas that once we get an agreed channel, shipping generally moves down it quite quickly and effectively as an efficient market? Is that a fair summation, do you think?
I think it's going to need quite a bit to get us to move down the pathway Paddy. I think that we're going to need supporting policy frameworks from governments to get a level playing field. The new fuels that I talked about, hydrogen and ammonia, they are more expensive than the current fuels. So currently the production cost of these fuels are 2 to 3 times that of a hydrocarbon-based equivalent. So there are going to be costs involved in this, and we need to get a level playing field with things like supporting frameworks. And I think the other thing is the safety aspects of these fuels. Remember, it's taken us 50 years to get comfortable with LNG. In terms of the considerable efforts been invested, all the operating experience, and that simply does. It's not the same for hydrogen and ammonia. There are very, very big safety challenges. We've got to make sure that we get that operational experience. And I think the other one is sustainability. When we use these fuels, and I know we talked about this before, Paddy and Nikolas, is when we get these fuels, they've got to come from a zero carbon source.
Yeah.
We don't want to divert the carbon from one source to another. Yeah. It might be zero carbon on the ships, and yet it might be made in a way which is not green, shall I say. So I think that's sustainability. And remember, we're not the only ones who are going to be choosing the fuels. I think that if you're talking about a fuel that airlines will use, that will not necessarily be available to us, because I think the airlines will get first choice on that, because it is far more challenging. So you can start to see with all of this and the cost aspect, which is very important in shipping, of course, as any other industry, in terms of making these decisions. So it's not a simple matter of just switching from one fuel to another. There is a lot to take place. And I think, as you say, Paddy, it's crucial that we work together. You mentioned the pharmaceutical industries. There are other examples, cancer around the world. The whole of the medical industry works very well around cancer, space technology as well.
Yeah.
And it's not something we've been used to doing in shipping, is working so well together. I think we're getting there, and there's some good examples. One of the coalitions that I'm very strongly involved in is Together in Safety. And it's been incredible to see all of the shipping industry associations, ship owners, ship managers, classification societies, insurance groups, all working together. And I think that's a great example for us to follow.
And so if I take it correctly, the image that you would have perhaps is of a national and regional response, because I suppose if we have different styles of shipping with different abilities to access direct solar power, or whether they're able to use particular types of fuel because of the autonomy of a ship, we might end up with a patchwork quilt of different solutions for different areas or different regions. Do you think, is that where we're going to go, Nikolas, or are we going to go to a globalized carbon?
Well, I hope that your example with the pharmaceuticals could work in shipping, in the sense we are down to 2 real engine makers. So it's not that we have a dozen of competing engine makers coming up with the 2 technologies. So I think this, of course, when you buy spare parts is an expensive situation, but when you need to concentrate and focus with two large companies on their research and development, I think they can work together and they can find a common solution of what is the most efficient method of actually fueling a vessel. So I think that's a good start, that you have 2 companies, and it must be much easier for them to be even forced, like in the vaccine case, to work together and come up with an environmental solution. So I hope it's going to be more of a global solution rather than a total confusion that no one knows. But as Grahaeme mentioned, and you mentioned, we are running ocean-going vessels. So we need those vessels that can go for 10,000 miles without having to refuel. I'm sure that in our beautiful countries like the UK and Scandinavia and Greece, where you have a lot of coastal trading, you could come out with solar energy, you could come out with batteries, with the Tesla solution. But for us on the ocean-going vessels, we need a global solution.
Excellent. That's a really nice summary, I think, because I really like your point about the two engine manufacturers, because it also brings me round to other things that we've seen change. And one of them, of course, is this. We've got used to holding different types of meeting. How much has the social interaction through Zoom or Teams or whatever other what method we're using, how much do you think that that's going to spark change in the way that we can work and the relationships that we can sustain that might lead us to changing conversations? And Grahaeme, maybe I could ask you about that. I mean,
yeah, it's okay. So I think that what we found is that there are some kinds of interactions which are extremely difficult to do in this way. Things like strategy development type work where you need to get around whiteboards and roll sleeves up and things like that. I find it absolutely impossible. And also big meetings, board meetings, things like that, very, very difficult. You miss that interaction, the interjection, the body language, the facial expressions and things like that. So I think that and meeting people, I'm really missing meeting people. I think these things, meeting customers, are very, very difficult. But I think that a one-to-one type discussion is much easier. And in that respect, we've been using this very effectively. So, for example, me as well, I would go and visit ships. I'd visit them at the worst time when they were in port. And they've got loads going on, and of course they're trying to get through all the paperwork and all the various inspections. Now we can visit the ship while it's in motion in the ocean, and you get a much better engagement with the crew. Yeah. And actually, I find that works very, very well. Another thing we're doing is looking at inspections. So previously we'd take somebody who was, say, a generalist to undertake an inspection of a ship. Now we have something which I've called the digital lounge, which looks something like I'm seeing now, where I can see Paddy and Nikolas. And from anywhere in the world, I can bring one of our experts or an industry expert into that inspection. So he or she does not need to travel to the ship.
That's brilliant.
And we take them out of action while they get there and get them back. They could be actually undertaking these inspections on several ships at once. And it leads me and my team, we're talking about something which we call continuous assurance. So instead of like having an MOT on your car or once a year, we like you're seeing on cars now, where you have a sort of a continuous inspection, because there are sensors coming up and telling you what's happening. And you could see that this sort of technology that we've turbocharged probably 10 years forward. It was always going to be there, but we've turbocharged it and put it all together in one place at once. I think is extremely exciting in terms of a way forward, but it won't replace everything, no.
Okay, and so we'll miss the human contact, but that sounds really exciting. That idea of having a resource for the crew, which can be really very specific by being able to have conversations with experts, sounds very, very good. Nikolas, is something similar happening at 10, or are you just missing the travel?
Well, I think the wife and the children want me out of the house, but otherwise, no. I think it is very, very true that although we are missing the human interaction and actually going and as kicking the tires, it has proven to be a very efficient way of communicating. I think it is the death of the conference call. Yesterday we had the board meeting, and a year ago it would have been on a conference call where you could not see anybody, and you could hardly hear anybody. And the conference call is it's like the old cassettes they're forgotten. Yeah. So yes. we are all on what we're doing today, and I think we're going to do more and more. But we are lucky because our generation has over-traveled, so we can step back and enjoy, and we know what's behind wherever we are. I'm only worried about the newer generations that they will be stuck only watching each other virtually on on a screen. So we need actually to get them also to travel
Also
before.
Great. Well, look, thank you both very much. It's been that's been a really enlivening conversation and a great opportunity to get an insight into the challenges and into the way that those challenges are shaping the ways that we'll go forward. I think we've heard some really important things, and I'm really glad that the three of us have been able to reintroduce the tie. I won't have them. I know that one of us is not wearing any trousers, but I will not let you know which one. I look forward to seeing you both in live soon.
Okay, thank you, Paddy.
Cheers.
Thanks, Nikolas.
Well done, Paddy. See you soon. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Aylett, Director of Policy at the Chamber. I've only been here a short while, but fascinating to see the quality of the speakers we've had this morning. A huge thanks to Dr. Grahaeme Henderson, OBE from Shell, and to Nikolas Tskakos from Tskakos Energy Navigation, and of course to Paddy Rodgers, National Maritime Museum, who'll be joining us later on in plenary after the sessions and also later on in the day. Thank you very much, and a huge thanks to our sponsor of that session, Lloyd's Register. We're now got a short break, but I'm going to give you a quick brief on what's going to happen at 10:40. And what we're moving into next is our breakout sessions. And to access these, you look at the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see sessions. And if you click that tab, you can then go into the sessions and choose whichever one you want to follow. We've got 4 fantastic sessions lined up this morning. The first one is environment, sponsored by Fraser Nash. And that's going to be moderated by Tom Strang from Carnival, who's also chair of the Chamber's Safety and Environment Committee. We've got the other sessions. We've got People, which is sponsored by Northern Marine, and it's going to be moderated by Mark Stagg from City of Glasgow College, who's also chairman of the Maritime Merchant Navy Training Board. Next session is Safety. This is sponsored by V Group and is moderated by Mike Bradshaw of V Ships, and is also chair of our Safety Culture Working Group at the Chamber. And then the other session is Technology, which is sponsored by the UK Ship Register and is moderated by Nick Chubb of Thetis. So 4 fantastic sessions. When you click on the session tab on the left-hand side of your screen, you don't need to share your audio and video to take part in these sessions. You can simply watch the panel and ask questions using the sessions tab in the text chat, which is the right-hand side of your screen, as you can probably see now. So we're going to have a 10-minute short break, time for a comfort break or a cup of coffee or whatever you wish to do. And then we'll start again at 10:40. This session will run for an hour, and then at 11:50, we'll be moving into plenary. Thank you.